Hi everyone, my name's Neil von Hoopt and I'm from the Australian Institute of Training and Development, welcoming you to our webinar series. I'd like to start first off actually with a shout out to Redback Conferencing. We've actually just finished recording an interview with Laura Overton in their studios. Last Friday we used their web conferencing facilities to do some team training, and today we're in their studios again for this webinar. Great people to work with and a great team delivering some really good products and some really good services for us. So a big shout out to them right at the start of the webinar here. Second thing I want to do is to say thank you. We've already got some people jumped into the chat box and responding to my initial question about something you've learned this week. It's really interesting to see what people have learned. And I want to encourage you to continue to interact with us down in that chat box. I am going to put another question into the chat box, which would be helpful for Laura. So I'm going to pop that in now and you can start responding. What are you hoping to take away from today's webinar? Would be great for Laura to have some ideas for that. Laura is actually just sitting next to me and she's watching the chat box closely, so please pop your answers into there. I want to flag for you also, if you're looking at the bottom left-hand side of the screen, that we will be live tweeting this event. So Jo, our comms manager, is back in the AITD office, and she's going to be using the hashtag AITD webinar. And if you are tweeting along with us, then please include the AITD handle, which is up there on your screen as well, at AITD1. Good to see some answers coming into the chat box down there. Last little bit of housekeeping before I introduce Laura is if you're having any difficulty hearing, you can actually dial in and listen via your telephone. Up on your screen at the moment is the number to dial in on, and there's a passcode to enter, and you will be able to hear us via your telephone as well as just watching the slides on the screen as Laura gets into it. But really, today is all about Laura and this new report. Laura Overton is the founder and CEO of Towards Maturity, a global research organisation, and she's joining us today to launch for the very first time this report, the Unlocking Potential in Australasia report. So I'm going to hand straight over to her, and I will be jumping into the chat box. At the end of the webinar, Laura will have some space for questions, but she will also just jump into the chat box at the end, and you have opportunity there to ask some further questions. So welcome, Laura Overton. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Neil, and thank you everyone for joining in on this program as well. I'm so excited to be here to be able to share some of the research findings that we've found. You know, and the main reason that I'm excited about this is because I'm really passionate about learning and development professionals around the globe actually unlocking our own potential. I believe that now is a time where we can make a difference in a way that we've never been able to do before, but I also know that it's tough. It's really tough out there. There's a lot of high expectations from business about what is needed, a lot of pressure on us, a lot of change that's going on as well. So really that's the reason we've been doing research in this field for the last 13 years, is to say, okay, well, let's take a step back. Let's step away from the clamour of what's going on in our business, what's going on in the world of work, what's going on in the world of technology, and say, okay, well, what needs to happen, and what is the data? What does the data tell us about helping us create some of those ideas moving forward? So those of you who are looking for new ideas, new strategies, I just say, look, let's approach this next 45 minutes with an open mind and to see where we're going to be able to take that. This report is going to be available to you, but there's also going to be an email address that's available if you want to email it, resources@towardsmaturity.org, because we've also curated a whole heap of case studies and different things for you to reflect on with your team and to take this back. So it's great that we've got this recorded today. So let's have a look at the research. Well, I'd like to let you know that it's a local collaboration, but with a global perspective. As you can tell from my accent, and I promise you, I'm afraid I'm going to use the word data a lot rather than data, so please forgive me. But, you know, what we want to do today is to kind of share some of our findings, not only locally, but also how that fits with ideas from around the globe. We need to be open-minded with this. So at that local collaboration, with a global perspective. First of all, it starts with you, and I know many of you have actually used this benchmark process that Towards Maturity provide to stop and reflect on your own strategy. And this is about an hour-long process. There's about 120 leaders from the region have taken part in that. People like you from the private, public, not-for-profit sector, those with managerial roles in learning, those which have got experience and those who are new in place, those with large organizations, small organizations, multinational organizations. People like you have contributed to this data, and that's what we're going to be reflecting on today. But equally, we've been using this research with over 6,000 L&D leaders like yourselves from 55 countries. So we want to bring the outside in. And we're able to do that thanks to the support locally of some great organizations with the AITD to provide us with that kind of advice, guidance, collaboration, and also with these great guys, Kineo Good Practice, Sabra, ITC Learning, and Workstar, who've basically allowed us to be able to fund this research. People who are passionate about getting good independent data into your hands to help you change some of these areas. So really, why do we want to do this? Mainly, is it because we're going to be sharing graphs? Absolutely. Is it because big data's in? Not so much. It's because data opens conversations, and I think too much in our industry has been driven by opinion, new technologies, new ideas, and often when we come off something exciting like this or a conference, opinions don't really count when we come back into the office. But what does count, what does open up new conversations, is data. And data opens those conversations, and conversations open the opportunity for change. So if there's only one slide in here today that will help you open a new conversation in your team with your business leaders, then please capture it, use it, and let us know how that change has gone. So really, that's where what we're here to do today. So first of all, let's take a look at what we explored for the critical goals for learning and development. Part of this benchmark process, we ask you to reflect on what are your drivers, what's important to you in the future. And one of the key things that you share with your peers around the globe is a point towards efficiency. Kate, I think you mentioned earlier about delivering more for less. And this is just one example of the efficiency goals that we've seen in the region. 98% are looking to increase access, increase flexibility of learning, increase the volume, the quality of courses, the quality of programs. But you know what? That's not just all. We're also seeing in the region, more in fact than around the globe, that you're looking to kind of change the processes of learning. That courses are no longer just there to deliver sort of the traditional, but how do we speed up the rollout of new systems, new processes? How do we change the way that we're doing blends? How do we do the way we do traditional training in a different way in order to get great results? So it's so critical for us, certainly in the region, that you're looking to find true process, and this is just an example of what you gave us. Didn't stop there though. We also saw that in the region, like peers around the globe, that we are hungry to boost performance. We're hungry to not just deliver great courses, but actually change behavior and change performance in the region. And that part of that is about agility, about responding faster to business conditions. So there is an awareness, I think, with the learning community in the region that we need to be doing more than just delivering courses. We need to change performance, we need to change the agility of the organization, and actually, ultimately, many people are looking to influence the culture. At a time when Australasian businesses are impacted by what's going on in the global economic climate, when business leaders in the region are saying, talent is critical, keeping our people is critical in this new world of work, the knowledge economy is critical, technology is having an influence on the way we're doing business in the region. It is no wonder that learning professionals in this region are saying, actually, we want to be able to play a part in this. We want to create an environment environment of learning, which doesn't just mean that people are connecting and engaging with our courses, but where we are making a contribution to the way that our organization is responding to change. So it's very exciting, and we're certainly seeing that in the region and in around the globe as well, that there is a common goal of learning professionals today. And one of the things that we're doing is that we are turning towards new tools, new technologies, new approaches to help us to achieve some of those goals. Now, in the region, around about 17% of budget, learning and development budget of local organizations is spent on using different technologies. Now that's actually slightly under the peers in the rest of the globe, which has been around about 19%. So spending slightly less, but what's really interesting is what we're spending it on. And you can see here that, yes, a lot is being spent on e-learning programs. A lot of courses are being developed in-house locally here in the region. Number of people are also using live online learning, nearly 90%. And also in the region as well, you're also investing in tools and technologies, which is not just about programs, but about job aids, checklists, infographics, starting to come into the blend to the way that you're doing things. You're also more likely in the region to be using things like video. Actually, it's about 70% of your peers in the rest of the globe are starting to look at video, in-house video, and video that's being brought in, bringing external practices in. Mobile learning is also slightly up, but what's interesting here is although we're using a lot of mobile in the region, we're actually not really harnessing the full areas around the mobile programs. So when you're talking about using apps, developing apps in-house, we're actually not using some of the practical tools that we use on our phones on a day-to-day basis in learning at the moment. Things like wearables, augmented reality, things like Google, sort of some of the things that are coming through from Google and the augmented reality. Now what we're finding here is that as a region, you are really experimental. If there is something going on, there is something in the region where somebody is actually looking at it. Now, most of this work here isn't being involved in full-time kind of adoption of wearables, but we're certainly seeing more experimentation. You know what, Rebecca, you're commenting that 17% of budget seems low, and it is, but the 17% of wearables, that type of budget is quite high. You need a lot of money to be able to experimenting with some of that, and I think it's some of the larger organizations that are starting to explore this, but we're certainly seeing more explorations in using wearable technologies, augmented reality, virtual reality, things like Oculus Rift in learning in this region. And it's typically for things like health and safety and where practice in a safe environment is being used. So some interesting areas there. We're also seeing quite high use of things like AI, the way that we can personalize learning, the way that we can use chatbots, the way that we can use technology to experiment. Now 100% of this is experimentation at the moment. So this just kind of gives you a little bit of a flavor. And and I think, Michelle, you're making a comment there about, I think different sectors are using this. So obviously the aviation sector, it's a safe sector, and in fact simulations have been used in that sector for quite a while. Con, you also are commenting there about the LMS is not dead, but I think one of the things that we are seeing here in Australia is that there is also quite a significant interest, more so than in the rest of the globe, in platforms that are also there about the learner experience, the broader experience of an individual for sharing, for connecting, for sharing their videos, and that shift starting to go along there. And I think that's in line with some additional research that's been done by Good Practice in this field as well, which was more interview research research to show that some of these new platforms are being used to kind of experiment and connect and engage. So it's quite a lot of interesting things that are going through in the technology side of things. And what's interesting as well is that, we are planning to increase our budgets. And in fact, the budgets here in the region, generally, training budgets overall, those in pale blue on this graph, over 80% of us are either looking for it to stay the same or to increase. But when it comes down, again, back to your point, I think it was Rachel, about the percentages being slightly low about what's being allocated to technology, 70% are planning to increase that over the next couple of years. So I guess the question is, against those goals, how successful are we? Now, you're asking quite a number of questions in the chat room at the moment, like learning record stores and XAPI, and I've shared with you some of the high popular ones and some of those which are kind of on trend at the moment. But what we have asked in our studies, and we're certainly happy to answer this offline, is across all of the board, all kinds of technologies, all tools, techniques, social media, for example. In fact, Australia are using more social platforms, things like Yammer internally, and looking at that with learning. But one of the challenges is that we're not necessarily getting the results that we're looking for. Now, certainly in the region, we're getting better results in things like compliance training and compliance culture as well, and also better results in kind of shifting to perhaps the new models of learning. But some of those areas that we were talking about before, in fact, fewer than half of us are actually achieving our goals in the region. So things like increasing access and flexibility. Now remember earlier, over 90% of us are looking to achieve benefits in all of these areas. But in fact, only 35% compared with the rest of the region, even though we're using more technologies than ever before, 35%, this is the dark blue, the region, are actually achieving those goals. Only 29% are speeding up the process of rolling out new processes. Only 8% are increasing the capability of solving new problems. Now, you can see here, peers around the globe, this is a common challenge. It is a common challenge. Those of us who are looking to achieve our goals, we're not necessarily achieving them. So I'd like to ask you a question in the chat room now as to what do you think is holding us back, and love to get your views. Obviously, I've got a few comments here about the technologies, but I'd like to redirect our thinking just for a moment into the chat room to say, okay, the technology itself isn't necessarily making the difference. So what's holding us back? We have high expectations of technology, but we're not necessarily achieving that. So love to get your views in the chat room, and I'm going to just pause for a moment. I'm not afraid of a silence, and to let you just reflect on what perhaps is holding us back from achieving some of those goals. Thank you so much for sharing some ideas there. We've got Con saying L&D capability coming there. Annie, your comment about too many processes, I think is really, there's a lot going on right now. Elizabeth, I think you're kind of linking into that. Perhaps there's lack of clarity through there. L&D capability, the speed of change is coming through as well. Arlene talking about decision makers, a number of you talking here about decision makers and senior business buy-in. We've got a vision. It's really clear that we're no longer talking up to learning professionals, training departments who are delivering courses. I think it's very clear that we've got a vision, but it's also very clear that the technology, the systems, the infrastructure, the expectations of business, I think you're talking about here, is stopping us from achieving that. Elizabeth, your point there about bad experience, I think that's really important for us. I've been working in the technology-enabled learning field for over 30 years. During that time, we've had lots of opportunity to get lots of bad experience in there, and many of us have seen that. And that links into, Kate, your comment there about disengaged staff. We're throwing a lot of technologies. We're throwing a lot of cheaper technologies. Some of the platforms about designing programs are easier to use, which means often we're not necessarily connecting and engaging through. So I think there are some really powerful comments that are coming through here, and that certainly reflects some of the struggles that we've seen in the data itself. I think what's interesting, though, we've been tracking this for a number of years, and many Australian organisations have been taking part. And actually, some of the perceptions have decreased a little bit. But overall, what we have seen is that there are still some challenges. There are still some challenges in this space. So I think what we need to be seeing that the challenges here is less about the technology, but it's more about the stakeholder engagement, the things that we can do something about. So I think that's something that we need to be considering. So if we're looking here a little bit about unlocking potential, some of these barriers are decreasing, but there's still a long, long way to go. And I think one of the things that we've been focusing on at Towards Maturity for the last 13 or 14 years while we've been investigating this is, what does success look like? Our very first study was with 16 organizations who were perceived to be successful. And success isn't about standing up against the crowd. Success isn't about boasting. But what we're identifying is that success is about achieving the things that our business is passionate about. And success will look different for each of your different organizations. So how do we achieve that success? And that's one of the challenges that we've been looking for. Because one of the things that we've found is that when we've been looking for a correlation, a statistical relationship between the outputs, culture, agility, business performance, productivity, performance, behavior change, the things that are passionate for business leaders, when we look at that, what we find is that actually the technology does not correlate back to that success. How we use some of these tools does. And typically over the years, what we've been exploring, working with business leaders, working with learning leaders, working with people who are setting change agendas for the industry, is that there are some common strategies for success, a framework for success. And those of you who've been through the benchmark process know that we've asked you to reflect on these statements, asked you to reflect on a number of these different areas. So what we've found is that the more active an organization is in some of these areas, the more results they're getting. And we are able to track success in these areas using the Towards Maturity Index, which is a single baseline. And the idea is that we can look at that index to establish a baseline. And I can see here there are some really interesting discussions around the barriers. And this big issue around fads, around the silver bullet, around expecting something new to come in and deliver against the goals, just does not work. This framework that we've got up does work. Unfortunately, it's not sexy, and it's not something that's kind of incredibly, oh my God, I've never seen this before. Because as we go through this, the new strategies that we need to take is about applying common sense to today's current business problems, about becoming business thought leaders, and applying some of these tools and technologies to those common problems. So what I want to do is to share with you what the research said around that framework for success. Because what we've found, if we just take those goals that we were looking for before, those in the top 10%, let me just reflect you back, top 10% of the Tools Maturity Index, which is measured against these tactics, they are getting those results and more. So they're twice as likely already to getting increased access to visibility and flexibility. Twice as likely to be rolling up new processes, so i.e. responding faster to business and helping business respond faster to change. They're 3 times as likely almost to be increasing job productivity and helping an organization to respond faster to change. And look at that, compared with some of the Australian organizations, they're also increasing the capacity of an organization to solve problems. Now, one of the questions you're probably asking me is, who are these top performing teams? Who are the top tech companies? And what is exciting to see is that there are many who are surfacing here in the region. Now, we, over the next few months, are hoping to capture some of those stories of local organizations. But as you know, the whole process of this benchmarking is completely confidential. So we're not just going to be sharing a story for the sake of it, but we would like you to be able to see how we can actually achieve and learn from some of these top tech organizations. And in fact, across the board, top tech organizations are consistently delivering what matters to business. And you'll find in this main report data from the region and beyond of how organizations are improving productivity by 12, 13, 14%, how they're reducing time to competency by the similar amount. And you remember I talked earlier to you about how data can open conversations. Well, what we want you to do with this is not be discouraged that the region is or is not achieving against these top performing organizations. But this is about having a conversation with business leaders to say, look, some of our competitors, some of our customers, some of our supply chain might be top tech organizations. They're thinking about things differently. So therefore, maybe we should as well. So this data is not here to demoralize us. It's to encourage us and to spur us on. Because the top tech organizations, they are not from one sector. They're not from one country. They're not even the organizations got the biggest budget. Or they are allocating slightly more of their budget to new ways of learning, but they certainly aren't the biggest budgets around. So I think one key thing for us here is about being encouraged. And I want to share with you some strategies and some tactics just in the last few minutes of this program. So if we're looking at building strong foundations for our strategy using this model, thinking about defining need. Defining need is about our strategic alignment, the extent to which learning is strategically aligned with the direction of the business. But it's also business alignment as well. And you know what? Australian companies are pretty strong in this space. One of the things is stronger than the rest of the globe is, making sure that the learning you're providing in learning and development supports the goals that the business needs. You're having that conversation up front. It's like the rest of the globe are slightly behind on that. Top tech organizations, it's nearly 100% of us are very strong on that process. But locally in the region, we're perhaps missing a trick in actually working with business leaders up front to define what their goals are that they want to improve. So it's clear that we're strong on stakeholder engagement, about having the conversation, about looking at what's going on in the business and trying to line up to it. That is good. We must not negate that. But one of the areas where we can perhaps get better is being able to have that conversation up front with those business leaders. To define what's important to them. Not to assume what's important to them, but to have the specific conversation. And you can see here that that's possibly an area that we can think about our strategy. If you think about a program that you're working on right now. The second area of this model is we found very early on that high-performing teams build strong foundations, not just by aligning to what the business needs, but also understanding what the learner needs. And typically around the globe, it's only about 30% of us are proactive in listening to our learners, not boxing them in, but finding out from them what works and what doesn't. Slightly higher in the region, actually 36% of those in this region are proactive. It's still only a third, but you are more proactive. Now, by listening, you are more likely than the rest of the globe to be offering more options for staff themselves to be more flexible in their working, putting staff as an organizational priority. Their flexibility in this new world of work is a critical thing. Again, culturally, that's something that the high-performing teams are there for. But when it comes to supporting individuals about their individual career aspirations, the employee experience from when I join the organization through to when I leave it, and the role of learning to support that experience of an individual, that's an area where we can really start to make more sense. And so some of the tools that we're using, we can be using those to actually encourage people, onboarding, starting before someone joins. Things like that. Compliance programs are no longer just hours and hours of boring page turning, but something that's more of a campaign or a movement within an organization to recognize and reward an individual as they go through the organization. And it's critical that we get to that point. We've done research with over 40,000 learners, trying to underpin and understand what our learners really want. And you know what they want? Regardless of whether or not they're working in a kind of sectors, whether they're young people, whether they're old people, they just want to be able to do their jobs faster and better. It's the number one motivator for them to connect and engage. Understanding that helps us to really focus in on how our solutions are doing that. Because if they're not supporting the goals and the objectives of individuals, they're not going to connect, they're not going to engage. The third area in this model is around work context. And this is a critical area because it's very clear from these high-performing teams that they are not just designing programs in isolation, but they are aware of the broader context, the talent strategies, the IT strategies, the management culture of the organization as well. And what we're finding here, again, there are strengths in this region, that you've got strengths to build on, that not to ignore, that really correlate back to success. So the fact that organizations are your managers are expected to take responsibility of developing skills for the staff. This is really significant. Learning in the new world of work is not just a responsibility of the learning and development function. It does mean that we need to work more closely with managers to equip them, not to become learning managers, but to become individuals who support learning at that point of need. Individuals which encourage a culture of learning. And we can do that by modeling change in the way that we build programs for managers. Interestingly, actually fewer organizations in the region use new models of learning for supporting managers. Typically, the majority of learning for managers in this region is done in the classroom. And we're not using some of these new tools to help managers reflect on what they're doing back in the workplace, connecting, engaging. And if we're not modeling effective processes with managers, then we're not able to help them to model effective processes with their team. Another thing that we're not doing as well, perhaps a little bit of a warning sign, is that we're not getting close to our IT systems. Now, we say that they're not equipped to cope with what we want them to do, but 90+% of the high-performing teams are finding out what their current IT systems are doing that they can use to harness for learning. Our new conference facilities being brought in, is new internal social networks being brought in. Rather than insisting people come to us, what the high-performing teams are doing is they're going to the IT department, they're becoming best friends with them, they're working out what's coming down the line and how they can use what's already happening in the organization to facilitate new ways of learning and new ways of thinking. Capability is another area. How do we build the capability of the learning function so that we can build the capability of the organization? And what we found here is that you're slightly ahead of your peers in the globe, but still only a third of learning staff are confident in incorporating new media in learning design. Now remember, before, you're using more technologies, you're using more things than ever before. So you're starting to apply and experiment, but our skills are not catching up with that space. And what we're finding here is that whilst you're using more social media, you're experimenting more with social technologies here, you're less likely to be active in encouraging staff to collaborate and build those knowledge resources. So it's those skills that we need in our own teams to be able to do that's going to be so critical. And we need skills in our teams as well to encourage engagement. This is one of the pillars of success here, involving managers in design of learning solutions. Pretty good at that. But again, it's not as many as the top performing teams. And as I mentioned before, modeling that change, modeling that engagement. What does new look like? How do we model that for the people who are new in organization? How do we model that for the people who influence our organization? Very strong role that we can play there. And then really finally, it's about how can we articulate and demonstrate value. About regularly reviewing programs. We're doing that. That's a strength in the region compared with the rest of the globe. But we're not communicating success back into the line managers. We're not capturing stories. We're not reviewing with business the performance goals that we had up front. We're not talking about demonstrating return on investment, but demonstrating and articulating business value. And that really makes a difference. So this just shows you a little bit around the region, slightly ahead of your peers in the areas that we've talked about, but in orange, choices, environment, and gathering feedback is critical. So the kind of essential skills and not so essential skills of learning and development. I think one of the things that we need to do now is to, as we close this webinar, is to be thinking about how do we build our own skills. And again, it'd be great to see your views in the chat room as we close off. Please start to think about the questions you'd like to ask as well. But what skills do you think that we need to future-proof learning and development in the region? Well, here's just an example. I'd love to have your reflection there. But around the edge here are the skills that we believe in the region that we need right now in learning and development. And the pale blue line in the middle is the skills that we've got in place in the region today. Now, stakeholder engagement, teaching and assessment, project management. There's some skills where we really are much stronger in the region than we are with the peers. But there are other areas that we really need. And across the board, you can see here there are gaps that we need to be focusing in on. So again, just keep that chat going, because this is what we need to do to move forward, to deliver what matters to business: growth, transformation, productivity, profit. It's within our grasp, and this evidence shows some of the ways that we can do that. But we need to do something differently. And I just want to kind of close off, I guess coming back to a comment that Karen made right at the beginning of the seminar. We were talking about what we've learned. And Karen, you were talking about houses coming down around you, in rubble around you, things that go up fast can come down fast. And I think moving forward, there are new strategies. There are new ways of thinking about the way that we work with business. There are new ways, new techniques, new tools, new technologies that we can use. But I think we need to kind of take on board one of Karen's points. We need to let go of things. And this is just, I just want to leave you with a kind of a bit of a cartoon about this monkey trap, where you can kind of catch a monkey by putting a banana in an open crate. They reach in, they grab the banana. Because they refuse to let go of the banana, they're trapped. gap. They're dragging their past around them. And I think going back to Karen's point earlier about things moving down, there are things in learning and development that we do need to let go of. There are things, our past successes, our programs that we've done, our awards that we've won even, may not equip us for the future that we need. So I think we need to be thinking about what needs to be done differently, and that we need to be able to think about how we can unlock potential in ourselves. And as I said, this research has come about as a result of collaboration from many people. But what we wanted to do, and Matt in the forward has said, we wanted to put this evidence directly into your hands so that we can have that confidence to let go of the things that we need to let go of, the way we've done things in the past, and the courage to take hold of some of the things that will really statistically make a difference. So I'd like to just hand back to you guys for some observations, some comments, and to really think about how we can connect with the future of learning in our organisation, the way we shift the culture. So Neil, let me hand back to you.
Laura, thank you so much. It feels like you've grabbed this research and this evidence, and it has become the cat amongst the pigeons. Just in that side little chat box that's going on there, just seeing how research and evidence stirs us as L&D people to kind of say, well, what do we do with this? What do we do with this research? What do we do with this evidence? So thank you so much. And I know there's a whole lot of people in there who are kind of going, I've got to see this report. I've got to see this report. And so there's good news about that. Laura mentioned earlier at the start that they will be able to access the report, and I'll tell you how to do that in a minute. What I want to do let you know, though, is that Laura's now jumping into the chat box while I just wrap up with these last couple of slides. So if you have a question that you do want to ask her directly, pop it into the chat box at the side there, and Laura's now sitting there poised on top of her keyboard, ready to kind of answer and respond to things directly. I do want to, again, just say a great thank you to Redback. They've made this studio that we're in available, and Jeff's sitting on the other side, just making sure that everything ticks away nicely, which is just fabulous. They do a great job. You can connect with them on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, all the usual places, and great people to get in contact with. Last couple of things then, just while Laura's in the chat box answering, and we will leave that chat box open past 1:15 when we're due to finish, and you can continue to kind of ask Laura things, and we'll close that off when the dialogue quietens down. If you're looking for a copy of the report, then Laura mentioned an email address at the start, so I'll let you know that again. It's just resources. You might want to get an email open on your computer if you're sitting there and get this address in there. So just resources@towardsmaturity.org. And when you send an email to that address, you'll get an automated reply, and in that you'll have a link to be able to download the report and some other curated resources and research, some award-winning case studies, just some great extra tools to kind of keep this dialogue going. Last couple of things. For us at AITD, the big thing on the radar at the moment is our AITD Awards, with the awards ceremony on the 17th of November in 2017. Tickets are available on the AITD website. And the other thing that you're going to find sometime over the next couple of days when you head to the AITD website is that you will, of course, be able to access a recording of this webinar, and you'll be able to share that with other people, open access on demand. So I'm going to sign off now and say thank you for joining us. We're not technically finishing because still Laura's going to be in that chat box a while, but we will go quiet and say thank you for joining us. Join us again on another AITD webinar, and have a good afternoon.